Welcome to the Friendly Aussie Podcast.
Welcome to the Friendly Aussie Podcast. Today we have Marc Selan. Marc ran a cannabis club in Spain and is back in Australia to, let's just say, bring us up to the standard of Spain. Marc has recently ran for the Victorian government under the Legalise Cannabis Victorian Party and is now looking to potentially develop some hemp bioplastics. Thank you for coming on, Marc.
They're excellent. Thanks for the introduction, guys. It's really, really cool to be in Queensland.
Great to have you.
Thank you very much. It's been a long time. I think 13 years since I've been on the coast.
Wow.
And you saw one of your old mates, like just the other day, and he didn't know you were here, and he just saw you.
It's just coincidence, you know. It's synergy.
Is it coincidence or is it fate?
Well, you know, I'm a bit of a nomad right now since I've left Spain, and I have no fixed address. So, you know, touching base with a few old connections out in public is magic. So it's good. It's good to see. It's a bit of a sign, I think. You know.
Yeah.
Looking at possibly relocating to this part of Australia. I did run in Victoria, but wasn't successful in getting a seat. But that was cool because it was an extremely great experience, and I learnt a lot.
What was the most interesting part about running?
I think, you know, really learning about the fundamentals of how the election process works.
Yeah.
You know, when you're exposed to it in a team environment, in an elected, you know, party. Then you get to see firsthand the dynamics, and you get to meet a lot of people as well, like-minded people. So you really actually get to go into a big think tank for your party. So I enjoyed sharing ideas and talking to like-minded, passionate people who were in the same, you know, position. They were all trying to make a change for Victorians, so they were very driven, very passionate. Yeah,
And we've gotten 2 seats.
Got 2 seats, so we're really victorious. It's a massive,
almost 3.
It's a massive deal for Victorians because now they actually got a voice, and they've got representation. Before that, there's a very considerable community like you would have here of cannabis consumers. You'd have something like 30%, 40% consumption who don't have representation on a political level, and we're still being criminalised heavily for consuming a plant. So it's important that we have representation on a political level.
Yeah, more people in there looking out for cannabis.
Well, just giving us a voice where we haven't had one before, because, you know, we've all realised, and everyone's been a bit educated over the last 8 years, that cannabis is now used for our health.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty common knowledge these days.
So we can see that there's no real need for police to be going out there arresting people for consuming it. Then,
I think that's the general consensus amongst.
So we need
progressive people, at least.
Yeah, that's it. It's tough in Queensland. We don't have an upper house, so getting anyone elected for the lower house from the Cannabis Party probably next to impossible.
We did kind of overperform.
We overperform, but it's still fundamentally, I think it's. You would be so very lucky in Queensland, I think, to win 1 seat in the lower house, because that person would have to probably have been someone in the major parties that actually swapped, that had such a strong connection to his local community or her local community. It's just tough.
I could see it now, because I was looking at Queensland and how it works in Queensland, and I was really wanting to, like, in the future maybe run in Queensland, and then I'm like, okay, this is really difficult.
Yeah.
It's absolutely nothing like Victoria or even New South Wales.
Yeah, no upper house really restricts a lot of things here.
What's interesting about the no upper house thing is that if you really have like a radical party with a big majority in the one
like
unicameral house, well, yeah, Labor, but actually the one that really shocked everyone, I think, was the LNP when they got in and wiped the table with Labor. There were 7 Labor seats in the entire state. And they had this massive supermajority. So they just decided to pass all of these reforms for the environment. They fired a bunch of public servants. They did this massive privatization thing.
Yeah.
And within the space of 3 years, they got kicked out because they were so hated, and they showed their true colours because there's no Senate basically keeping a clamp on them.
They just did whatever the fuck they wanted.
Yeah, but that's what happens, I think, when you have such a big majority and no upper house to regulate passing of legislation.
Yes.
So it's like a check.
Very imbalanced.
Yeah, it's like a check. Really.
Maybe there should actually be an inquiry into setting up a Senate in Queensland again. It seems ridiculous that we don't have a Senate, especially given the times.
Yeah, I suppose there's a good argument for it, but at the same time, I think I don't know. You know what Queensland? We're just like
We're lazy and we
ridiculously
don't really care.
patriotic for no reason as
That's
well.
true.
Like we think that because we do things differently up here, it's therefore better and good. So it'd be hard to convince people.
But I just so everyone's aware, that's pretty much the same in any country, in any place around the world.
Of course,
I mean, you're always going to be the same. The French, the Spanish, the Germans, they all think they know better than the other.
That's
Yeah,
it.
that's fair. I don't know. It just seems in comparison to other states, we tend to be quite parochial. But then you got WA that wants to secede.
Yeah,
You've got
but
Victoria and New South Wales that both think they're the best.
I think every country in Australia every state in Australia generally thinks they're the best.
Yeah, pretty
You
much.
know, like I think that's part of it. But the reality is we're all Australians and we're all pretty shit.
Uh-huh.
So we should unite together and smoke a little weed together.
Well,
that's
there's these invisible lines, and there's these separate entities that try and control us in between these invisible lines. So what I try and say is we're all Australians.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at your passport and you travel overseas, it doesn't say Queenslander. It does not say New
Yeah,
South
that's the
Welshman.
thing, hey.
It says Australian. So I just want to point that out to you guys. When you travel, you're Australian,
That's it.
regardless of what point of the world you come from. That's what I realised when I came back. I wasn't from Victoria. I'm Australian.
it is interesting how
Living in
like
Barcelona would be quite the
inner.
culture shock.
I was just thinking about like the inner dynamics
Well,
of
it
like
is.
Australians feuding with Australians, but then when you're outside Australia, you are just Australian. Like
Pretty
as
much.
Marc
You
said, like,
galvanise, yeah.
It's, that's interesting. But then because you were away for so long, you never had to identify anymore as the Victorian or something. Because Victorians definitely, to me, have a very different feel to people in Queensland.
Okay.
Like, I found Victorians always a little more uptight, a little more like on edge. Well, Queenslanders like, what? Like, huh? Yeah? Oh, you can do that. Yeah, no worries. Like, it's a little more...
No, I think that there's a mentality of a big city and
Yeah.
the population, and that impacts society.
Yeah.
And Queensland, you have also a different environment, like a physical. You've got more sun, and you're out more, and you've just got more space. So you just don't have the same pace.
The
maybe.
regional urban thing is really interesting.
Yeah.
It's like that is really the dividing line for the most part. But what's interesting is that you have many, like a diverse range of regional communities too. So
You do.
There's places like Nimbin where they've become like progressive cannabis capitals, and then others that they're still basically cattle towns or, wheat towns. Or
I think that's the
what
beauty
have you.
here. You have the space here. Like when we got back, it's like this big Australia to me now is like a big wilderness. It's a wild island, but you've got these diverse areas where you can have different societies existing with discretion from law enforcement, like you've mentioned Nimbin. They've, I actually can see there's discretion. And now with medical cannabis in Melbourne, in St Kilda, there's the Relief Pharmacy, and next door is
Right.
Mull Cafe.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you're allowed to vaporize cannabis
Mull Cafe.
inside and consume, a drink and your cannabis. So for me, that's discretion.
For sure.
That's police discretion, and that is good. But what we have to do is move a bit further on than that, and say let's allow everybody else in society as well to consume in a environment like Mull Cafe, and stop criminalising them.
What's the legal situation like over in Barcelona? Because that's kind of its own break off Spanish territory in a way as well.
Yeah, Catalunya has always been like other regions in like you guys in Queensland. You always, they're very proud of who they are.
Right. Yeah.
And they're also Catalans speak they speak Catalan,
Yeah. Right. Of course. Yeah.
which is not Spanish, so they speak Catalan.
What kind of language is that derived from?
It's probably a bit of a mix of French, Italian, and,
Okay.
and Spanish.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and so they speak Catalan, and they're very proud, and they wanted to have independence as well while I
Right.
was living there.
They fought a whole war about it.
Well, they had an election while I was there for independence, and it didn't go their way, and the Spanish government took away some autonomous powers from them.
Yeah.
And that was actually about the time where the Catalan government was regulating cannabis associations. So the way it works with cannabis associations in Barcelona is that you can apply for a license
Okay.
to
Cool.
the local city council.
Very cool.
And they were in a process of regulating us, where they had written out a whole legal document outlining that we could grow 150 kilos for our members on our own farms, as long as they knew the transportation routes, that we stayed to the transportation routes, and they would come with an a survey on what a taxable quantity of cannabis would be from the production that they would see. So they were going to come and do physical inspections and determine how much you were producing and work out a bit of a base tax that they would give you.
The council had that kind of authority.
The council they started regulating cannabis clubs because they became an extension of social clubs, right? Because in Spain, it's a common way that people start their own little businesses is they start private associations. They can become like self-employed, or they can start an association where you have a directive board, a secretary, a treasurer, and a president.
Sure.
And they change at an annual general meeting every 4 years, and then they're paid a salary, and they run the association, and you would have associations running for all different things. And an extension of these associations was to have cannabis associations because a lot of people consume cannabis and hashish in Spain because it's manufactured in Morocco, and because everybody consumed, and Spain has got a constitution that is 500 years old. It's a very old country, and in the constitution you can grow and do anything in the privacy of your home. It's not restricted to you can't use drugs.
It's in the constitution?
Yeah, it's in the constitution. It says you can grow and consume any drug in the privacy of your home, as long as you're not making a nuisance to your neighbours. Okay.
We should add that to our constitution.
That seems very fair.
So, but this constitution, it's respected by all the judges.
Yeah.
So if the police want to get a judicial warrant to enter your house, it's extremely difficult.
I see.
They just do not let police enter the private home, even if it's for cultivating cannabis, and they've done a heat signature read from a helicopter and they've seen lamps. They will not allow a judicial warrant to be issued until it's an exceptionally big production that they can actually say it's a criminal production.
That's a somewhat grey area, kind of creates a de facto.
It just means that you have the right to be to have privacy in your own home, and even if you're growing cannabis, which is maybe federally illegal, you can do it in the privacy of your home as long as you're not selling it or distributing it, and you're not annoying anyone else. So it's actually your human right to be able to have your home as your castle, and the police cannot really enter. Here, it's much different.
Oh yeah.
They can come and use they can use a terrorist or a cannabis smell as a reason to enter your house, and that shouldn't be allowed. You should need a judicial warrant. Police shouldn't have those powers because they're not equipped as officers to have that sort of authority. They need to be their tools, and they need to be directed by a higher power that has more authority than them in those instances when you're entering people's homes. And that's unfortunately where we've slipped away in Australia, and we've become this country that's ruled by fear because the police have too much power.
I would tend to agree with you. I think that part of it is that the police has so much power, not just because they've been militarized in certain respects, but also because they're, plugged into the US technological kind of empire. But also there's this situation where the Australian legal system has become increasingly more restrictive, so they can pick you up on a variety of offences and use that as they can basically use that as a justification to prosecute. Yeah,
and I think what I went and spoke to Deb Lynch the other day. I was lucky enough to meet up with Deb, and one of the things she was mentioning in Queensland is that there's a lack of legislation for police to have discretion. Like there's only a one warning that they can give you in a case where you are caught with a small amount. It's like a program.
A drug
diversion.
They can give you a diversion program if they catch you with a small amount, but beyond that, there's nothing else. There's no other discretion.
Did you know they can only do it twice? So
there's a court one, and then there's the police one. But I think if you get the court one, you can't get the police one. But if you get the police one, you can still get a court one.
Yes, correct. Which is why the police hand it out first, and then you go to court and they give you the diversion for the most part. So you have two chances, and third strike, you're out. Pretty much that's the system.
It's a bit disappointing. Yeah. It's a bit disappointing that these days when we acknowledge the medical use and we're able to get cannabis from a pharmacy now, that society and the police especially should have a big discretionary process where they just don't
leave you the fuck alone.
Yeah, especially if you're medical users. What are you testing for, or doing a saliva test on a roadside drug test if you're a medical user, and really anyone.
I think one issue that the government in general just doesn't understand, or they just choose not to,
Probably the
is yeah, it's probably the latter, but maybe not. Is they regard medicinally grown cannabis as different to street grown cannabis. They see it as two different things.
Yeah.
And even further than just that, they even look too much at medicinal cannabis versus medicinal cannabis, right? Where you've got different strains and stuff. Now, because it's gone into the medical, they're wanting to go, okay, these strains are good for these conditions, right? Which is great, because in theory that could work. But the thing is, it's not how it works for everybody, because everyone responds to cannabis differently. Exactly. So then we now all have to be scripted separate things so that they can justify us giving a particular type of cannabis. But the reality is it's all still fucking cannabis. I think that's kind of the point that people miss is everyone who uses cannabis, whether it's one strain or another, if they've got a certain condition that cannabis helps with, that other strain is still going to help. It's almost guaranteed to still help a little bit, in some regard. It just might not work as well as the other thing. So I don't understand, and this has just gotten really confusing for me over the last couple of weeks, why a doctor should be able to understand how I respond to cannabis, because they don't respond to cannabis. Like, how would they know? How would they know?
No, I think what we have to get to is a place where people who don't have chronic conditions don't need to be managed 100%. By doctors, and a lot of us are seeing it. And I even heard from Dr. Tate, who's here on the Gold Coast, mentioning in Brizzy, that he's in Brizzy, that for mild conditions that you can manage, you should have to access doctors and have consultations, because obviously someone like myself, I've got a chronic illness. I have ulcerative colitis. I use cannabis to regulate my immune function, but I don't have to have some special medical scheme or program that's maintaining my health. I know how to keep myself healthy, and I just can use any cannabis. For 8 years prior to me arriving in this country, I never had a medical prescription. I was using cannabis grown from my cannabis association by our members and by our farmers, and that was keeping me healthy. And then I came here and had to start getting prescriptions and paying doctors to change my prescriptions. So it's medical cannabis. The definition of it is any cannabis you're using to alleviate chronic medical symptoms, and that's medical cannabis in a... That's it. That's all it is.
Yeah. I agree. I think there's just this... Well, maybe it is that they don't understand, Josip, because there's this notion, I think, amongst certain legislators that there's just a wide world out there where everything's just bikey weed, and there's this, and I think it's an association from, it's still part of the community and part of what happens here in Australia, but it's really an old hat kind of notion that what's happening in the dark markets or in the black market is just unsafe, full stop. It's always PGR weed. It's never any good for you.
It has to be laced.
Yes, and that's why we need to run it through. And then there's this whole thing about making it a medicinal plant here in Australia. We have all of these really strict pharmaceutical regulations, and all of those apply to cannabis effectively because it's being treated in the exact same way, when you're right, it does require a different set of regulations,
it's what it comes back down to. What I probably want to point out to everyone who's listening is that it actually comes back to us, the people, dictating what we want in terms of what we want to regulate, because we can't allow government and pharmaceutical companies to set the standard by saying, hey, you can get a prescription, you can go for for chronic pain or insomnia and get a prescription if you like, but we should be dictating to government and to the pharmaceutical, we don't want to enter that facility anymore. We don't want to enter that system anymore. We just want to be able to self-cultivate, possess, consume. You police go, and when someone rings you up because they've had their car stolen, go and assist those people. Make sure that the mum who's got to drop her kids off at school is going to find her car so she can get her kids to school, so she can get to work, so she can
stop wasting resources.
And actually start assisting society instead of having big police operations like there was in Melbourne, Flagstaff Station, where they had over 100 police officers and sniffer dogs at peak hour, smelling Victorian citizens getting off the train after a day's work, just harassing them if they had cannabis. Yeah, they harassed a whole lot of medical users as well, and they were indiscriminate. So that's a lot of money and resources and time that
To do what as well? Basically to crush liberty in this country.
So
ultimately.
I think, you know, that it's very important that we vote for our cannabis parties. And in Queensland, I can see that it's a difficult thing, but it would be good if the people saw that cannabis it's about a fundamental human right that we're pretty much deprived of right now in Australia.
That's it.
What's the main difference you think in the attitude that exists in Spain and in these associations versus like why is it?
It's a health problem. It's between the health department and a cannabis association is a bridge between the public and the public health system.
Okay,
that's what a cannabis association is, and that's pretty much accepted in Spain. And the police have got 46 million people in a very small country to police, and there's a lot of cannabis consumers, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
They
it's
don't.
the biggest in the world.
They don't want to be wasting all their time and resources. They waste enough because there's a lot of entities growing large amounts of cannabis.
Sure.
They don't like it. They only want you to grow a small amount of cannabis for your club, and they want to try and restrict it that way. But they do it in a different way.
Mm.
But I think the main thing is that the Spanish have been exposed to cannabis culture with Morocco producing hash and being the gateway for the hash transportation through Europe for a while. And all the grandparents in Spain have smoked hash. They grow up smoking it, so that they've had experience. And that's what Australians lack, is we don't have experience with cannabis here. It's not a lot of us.
It's interesting because the herb grinder was invented in Australia in 1903.
I think there's a really strong homegrown
I think
kind of
cannabis
thing
has
going
been
on.
very prevalent
It's
in
just
Australia.
it lacks the institutional support.
That's why it's good to have like legalized cannabis parties. Even if we don't consume and smoke the stuff, the amount of things we could use in society and start benefiting from it are going to be much bigger if we can remove the prohibitive state around it.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a lot we could do.
I really like the idea of cannabis just getting down scheduled. I had this thrown to me where it's like it gets scheduled to like a Schedule 4, where it's like an over-the-counter, and then we could actually see buds and things. Because what I was thinking about, the biggest issue with this pharmaceutical model that we've kind of derived for me is, as a patient, I'm getting handed a tub of plastic. What's inside that plastic? I don't know till I open it.
Yeah.
I think that's problematic because fundamentally, my eyes and my nose can tell me what good cannabis is. Like, fundamentally, that to me is very honest. So if I can look at 10 different things from 10 different companies, be like, shit, great, good, you know, like, it's a decision that I can make myself, I feel.
Yeah. Look, you know, I got to say, I'm pretty happy that I could get off the plane when I landed here, and I got a prescription like the next day.
Don't get me wrong.
I got
legal weed
to me.
is so good.
So it was good in that respect. That I got to say we've come somewhere in the last 6-7 years. We've progressed. But what I think Aussies need to see is that they themselves, as the people, need to be in charge of the process making around what they want to consume. And like for example, in Spain, the Cannabis Association model was started by people who wanted to associate together in groups and consume together because hey, they all smoked. Mm-hmm. So they found it easier if they bought a pound or a large amount for a large group of people. It would keep the cost down, and it was for their own consumption.
I really like that that collective sort of model. I think that would be really interesting to see in a place like this.
It really keeps the cost down because like I've been outside and gotten weed outside of the medical. And it's too expensive. It's too expensive.
It's on par now. Like,
well, I don't know about on par, but it's too expensive still because outdoor weed is cheap to produce. So when in Spain, when I was buying outdoor cannabis, it was the price it should have been. And then I come here and I just think it's a bit too commercial. Everyone's going through for the jugular a little bit.
Well, the problem is there's so much risk involved here, you know?
Yeah, but still, I don't know. It's there's risk everywhere, but
I'm with you. I think there's a little bit of an assumption amongst. I don't want to call out like any section of the community, but I think there's an assumption amongst people who are in those circles in the dark markets that they can get away with whatever.
they can throw a number at you and you can take it, and most people will be happy that it's green and they got a bag of it, right?
Yeah,
but when you come from running your own club, and I used to select cannabis, and I wouldn't let genetics in the club sometimes, and I've come here and I've just had to loosen up a little bit and remember where I am. But still, you put a bag on the table for me and you want to charge me somewhere in the similar price range as medical, and I've got seeds in it, and it's not trimmed nice, and it's not cute, and all these things. It's like, man, I'm going to be 50 next year. I've been doing this a while.
The big problem as well, though, is the person that might be selling you that could be younger, and they just don't have a choice. That's what they get given. And that's the price they get given.
I understand that, but when I got this, it was off actually a master grower, and this was top shelf. So when you tell me top shelf and you give me top price and it's not, I'm like, no, you got to recalibrate yourself.
That's it. I get that.
That's the same everywhere. There's top shelf and there's not top shelf.
I will ask though. I'm so curious about the Cannabis Club, the Spain culture. Like, what is the culture of a Cannabis Club? Like, I walk into those doors. What happens?
When you walk in, like you see usually your friends. Like the first thing actually is we have a room where people make donations. This is how a club works. The first door is for the public. So you walk in, there's someone sitting at a table, and they meet the members, and the members make a donation depending on how much they're going to consume. Most of the members who come to the club live in the area, so they're usually consuming daily or every couple of days, and they'll come and they use the club as a place where they don't have to carry their cannabis. They can leave it at the club, so they don't have to take a big bag home. A lot of them would say, if I take 7 grams, I'm going to consume it faster. So they just come every day and they just take like 10 or 15 euros worth. Mm-hmm. And that will be their donation. Some of them might make a bigger donation and go away for the week, but they would come in, make a donation depending on how much they're going to consume or how often they come to the club. And then once they make their donation, they would walk into the club space, which is another door that opens, and then you're in the club, the smoking room. That space is ventilated, so you'd see big industrial piping. One's an extraction system, one's an interaction. So one brings in fresh air, one takes out and filters.
So you're a grow tent, basically.
It's a big grow room, right? It's a big facility of movement of air. And they would walk in, and we had a big club, 280 square meters. So you'd walk in and you'd see spaces where people would be socializing, playing games, working on computers, playing table tennis, pool, having drinks, or watching a soccer game.
This sounds awesome.
So people would just be sitting out socializing, and you'd go up to the bar, and you'd basically ask what cannabis we had at the club, because we would rotate from the farm. We had a production facility, and there was like a little list, and the list was between at any time we would have between 12, and at one time we had like 25 genetics, but that was when we had a lot of stuff. Usually it was around 12 genetics, a few indicas, a few sativas, and a hybrid or two. And then we had a couple of extractions, Moroccan hashes, and we'd have some BHO and some isolator hash and an edible, something like this. We kept it pretty basic, but they were quality, and everything was organic. Mm-hmm. So we had organic farming. And we had a good rotation of genetics. So you would see a list, and then you would just pick from that, and depending on the production of the genetic, if it was a big producer, it would be maybe 7.5 euros a gram, and if it was a smaller producer and a more boutique genetic like a gelato or some cross peyote cookies or something like that, it'd be 12 or 13 a gram. But it didn't really get much more than that. Mm-hmm. Tropicana cookies, we'd have genetics that were analysed regularly at 28%. So we had some really good genetics. Mac 1, Tropicana.
I had the Mac 1 actually this weekend.
Yeah, Mac 1's a gem.
It's nice.
So they would be our top shelves, but we would just sell them by the gram, half a gram. It didn't matter depending on.
If you bought more, were there discounts, or was it always by the gram?
No, like if you were a medical user, or if you were dispensing larger amounts at one time, we would say, you would get a 10% discount. Medical users had a fixed 15% discount. So if you came in with a card that said you had a chronic illness, you had a 15% discount whenever you came in.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That's cool. Really good model.
And we would also have CBD products, flour and tinctures, and the CBD cannabis was actually 6.5 euros a gram, and it was indoor certified organic, grown in Barcelona.
That's cool.
Yeah, actually in my suburb in Grazia, it was a legal facility.
That's cool.
So you could actually buy it grown in the area, organic certified,
made for you.
Yeah, so it was great.
So then I bought the gram.
Yeah.
Right.
You're gonna.
What happens next?
So you buy your gram. You can ask for a grinding tray and a
Yeah.
grinder.
So you just provide that?
Yeah, we provide that to all the members and papers
Yeah.
or a bong, but not everyone smokes joints.
Yeah.
A lot of joint smokers.
Did you have vaporizers? Like
We had a
volcanoes?
volcano, and we would have vape nights. Like we had events as well. So you might come in on an event night, and we're doing a promotion for the volcano, and we're teaching about because the club was a hub for learning. It was
So
a
it's
hub
been
for
like
education.
crying happiness.
So
good.
we would have these alternative consumption nights where we would have either a medicated or infused olive oil with some focaccia and some locally made cakes,
Ooh.
where people could dose. We would dose up just some nicely fresh bakery stuff, and then you'd go and you might try a dab. We would have like Dabby Day, where people would come in and have like vaporize some of the oils and try vaporizing oils, and that would be like €2 a dab or something. We'd have some promotion on it, not promotion, but just education more, just to come in and let people try it who don't usually try it, to experience it, and we'd have all these things where people could experience it, and we could educate the members and give them alternatives, because a lot of people in Spain smoke tobacco, and we would provide leaf in like 10 or 20 gram bags for €5 or €10, and I would say to the members, if you throw your tobacco in the bin, I'll give you one of these bags of leaf, and then after that they would actually start buying the leaf. They would start buying the leaf and stop consuming tobacco. So if you give people alternatives, and educate them, they will usually jump on them. Because smoking cannabis is way less harmful for your lung tissue than smoking tobacco.
I think you're right.
Just so everyone knows. I mean, I've been smoking joints for my illness for a long time, 13 years. I've been keeping myself healthy just from smoking joints, and I work out every day, and I'm fit as hell. So I don't smoke tobacco.
Yeah, tobacco definitely does a number on your lungs.
Tobacco's done a really funny thing in Australia. See, like I know in Spain, like it's always a spliff, right? Tobacco and weed. That's the combo. That makes sense to me. I understand tobacco.
That's
and
quite
joint.
a
I get
ubiquitous thing
right?
at this point.
But here we've gone just one step further, and we've put the tobacco in with our chop and put it into a bong, and then you get the hit of the tobacco through the like inhale of a bong.
It's really strong.
It's so strong, but it's so...
It actually magnifies the THC.
It gets you more stoned,
I reckon.
right? 100%. But also, it makes you come back for the bong. It's such more a cycle.
of
Because
course.
think about like
Really
the
bad.
quickness
It's
of
the
the
addictive.
You become
nicotine.
addicted to it.
Yeah, that's
Think
the
about the
problem.
nicotine hit, right? Coming back to a spliff, you'll come back to it, but like in an hour or two.
Of course.
But with the bong, you'll come back every fucking
You
10
could-
minutes
you-
because it's a little whoop, whoop,
I
whoop,
forget
whoop.
these things everywhere, and I
Look
walk
at that.
back.
Look at that roll, Mitch.
Fucking
This is
good.
someone who's been smoking
Yeah,
joints
I saw
for
you
a
using
very
the
long
lighter
time.
to like seal it.
Yeah,
You
but
roll
if
them
you,
inside out.
yeah, if you smoke joints and you smoke them off, and you're trying
You
to
don't want
smoke the
extra
least
paper.
paper,
Yeah.
and have the most flavour from your weed.
What do you call that type of joint where you roll it inside out and burn it
Reverse.
off? A reverse joint?
Yeah.
There's another name.
Inside
I've heard
out,
for it.
reverse. There's a
Sick.
common name.
Wiz Khalifa made them popular mainstream.
True.
He has a video out to show people how to do it, and he was like,
It's pretty easy.
one of the big ones. Yeah, you just roll inside out, and then you.
Well, you
stick
just got to make sure that you've put the sticky on the bottom right corner. The sticky has to be face down, bottom right corner if you're right-handed and you're rolling with your filter from the right-hand side.
it. No.
So that
okay.
when you tuck it, that first
It falls
tuck,
under.
that's the sticky bit under. And then when you get it around, you just lick in the outside of the paper, and it's
It'll
going to
just go
stick
through.
through. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
you burn it off. And burn it off when it's wet, otherwise you're going to burn a hole in your paper.
Yeah, no, I saw that once, started doing it, and seeing you do it again reminded me about it. I forgot all about it. Normally not a joint smoker, more into
Just
the
visually quite
vaporizers.
impressive, isn't
It
it?
is. If that like the flame that you get, it looks like a
Yeah.
little paper plane, just kind of like.
Yeah.
It does, yeah.
It looks
You,
sick.
you got to get it. Otherwise, sometimes if you let it go too wild, it'll burn a hole through the side. So you got to sort of control
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
fire, the whoosh. Yeah.
So, just backing up.
Yeah.
We're in the
So
clubs.
once-
we have events.
so-
and then you've rolled a joint, and you
Yeah.
just smoke a joint on the
You,
couch.
yeah, you
or
pretty
on a
much you'll
table,
sit
or-
down next to the Budtender, and you'll say, "How are you, man?" And he'll be like, "Yeah," and you'll start smoking, and sometimes you might offer it to him, and he'll take it. But usually, I ask my Budtenders not to smoke during work, but if I'm not there, they might get a slow
Get a
one in.
sneaky in.
It's a hard job,
Oh yeah.
And they'll sit down. They'll probably grab a drink, and they'll probably start chatting away to somebody else who's standing there, because you've got to understand that everyone in the club knows each other.
Yeah.
They come there a few times, so usually you got a buddy at the bar who you know, and it actually every time you come in, you're going to sit down and you're going to start chatting with someone you know. Yeah, so it's a big social hub, and even the elderly people who used to come in, they'd be like 75 years old, but
Yeah.
we had a rapport with them. So
Yeah,
they could
yeah.
come in and talk to somebody who was, in their mid-30s. Some of my managers were in their
Yeah,
mid-30s.
just getting someone to listen
That's
to.
some of the
Yeah,
biggest
and just chill
problems
out
in
and have a
society,
joint, and everyone was pretty reasonable people. We didn't have any wild people. I never had a
Yeah.
fight in over 7 years of running a cannabis club in
Arguments,
Barcelona.
though, surely.
There might have been a couple of disputes, but there was never anything physical. I never had to ask anyone to
Well, there you
leave for being physical. So I never had violence. I never had to have a bouncer.
Yeah.
Sick.
Very
cool.
safe.
How many members did you roughly have?
Over the course of 7 years, I would have had over 3,000, close to 4,000
Wow.
members. I would have
How many
serviced.
would you say are like active members? Though? Like-
Active in a year, we'd have up to 800 to 1,000 a year active.
Okay, so not like crazy numbers, really.
It's because you got to understand there's a high density. There was a higher density of clubs in Barcelona. They did go through and shut a lot of the unlicensed ones down because it got a bit wild.
Yeah.
And then they just came around and they checked that everyone's licenses were valid, that you had technical operating systems like your extraction and your wiring were for up to town planning standards. And there's still probably be around 120 or 130 licensed
Wow.
clubs in Barcelona. So you're talking about a population of around 100 people, a million people, so about a million and a half people. in
Really? Is that
Barcelona.
the size of Barcelona?
Yeah, the population's
sense.
around that. And
Wow.
I thought it was actually more.
Yeah, me too.
maybe 1.5 million max. And
Yeah.
they have a culture of it, they grow it. So those clubs don't service everybody because you've got a society that has a vast amount of it floating around.
So the clubs are not just the primary way of getting cannabis into Spain.
The lower quality cannabis is what the young guys will get on the streets
Yeah.
for they'll get it for like a couple of bucks a gram.
Right.
Like my
Your
son would.
swag sort of stuff.
Yeah,
kind
my
of
son
from
would
Albania.
sometimes. My son would sometimes show it to me. My son's actually still living in Barcelona. He's 18, and sometimes I'd catch him with cannabis, which is really quite common. Not
Yeah.
something that I had a dialogue with my son about cannabis use.
Right, of course. Like any responsible parent.
Yeah, and he would occasionally ask me for it, and I would say, listen, I don't want you asking me for it because you shouldn't be consuming it. Because I would explain to him that, hey, Dad uses it as a medication, and you haven't finished school yet, and you got exams coming up, and you got to give them the line still. If you're a parent, you still got to bark at them and give them the discipline and the that they should have. But I couldn't stop him consuming it.
Yeah.
I couldn't be with him all the time, so I just had to give him the line and let him decide. But yeah, he did ask me occasionally for it, and I'd say, listen, if you're going out with your friends once every 2 months, you can ask me for one gram. Because the stuff he did get on the street was grown with chemicals, and we had no chemicals in our facility. We didn't use chemicals, so I was a little bit like, I'd prefer you had this occasionally rather than getting cheap rubbish on the
Bit of
street.
an ethical thing.
But I wasn't someone who said to him, come and get it from me when you
When
want.
you need it,
It was
yeah.
not like that. But I just wanted to, and I explained it to him, and he ended up working in my club, and he understood. So education is the key.
Okay, that's interesting to
And
know, because I
dialogue.
always thought maybe the clubs are like the most predominant thing, but it's interesting to see. I went to Amsterdam and I loved it, but one thing I found, and it's kind of what was missing, was actually the feeling of a club. Everyone kind of very much in Amsterdam keeps to themselves. It
With
was
the cafe stuff.
yeah, the cafe. It's I don't know. They'll read the newspaper, they'll read their
Right,
phone, but it's everyone's just kind of
I tell you,
doing their own thing.
there's
Unless
some-
you're in a tourist spot, and then then they're tourists.
Yes, but there's something very, very liberating that I think we miss here in Australia, and it's also because of just how it's been over the last couple of years with dehumanising us and altering, person-on-person contact. But when you get the opportunity to consume in public with people around you, like I was lucky enough to go to Nimbin the other week, and it was like I need it because I'm spent a lot of time where I've been consuming in public, and it's very normal. And I think as a society we should push for that more.
Yeah.
That we should impose what we want on society rather than letting the industries and the governments around us imposing what they want from us, because we've got to stop being so obedient in Australia. We really have to learn to do as we please, and if somebody is going to give us resistance, then we're going to resist back. Like, if you're going to get a fine, then take it to court. Everyone should be taking it to court and giving the police a bloody hard time until they refocus on what a bad person is and start leaving a majority of the public alone. You know, we really need to push back a bit more here. But we just should be doing it a bit more with our friends in public. Like Nimbin was great.
There's a lot of reasons to do that. I mean, like you were talking about seniors entering into your club. I'm sure that's one of the few opportunities for them to really engage with people.
What happens when
it's less alienation? What
happens when seniors come in is they start seeing that there's an environment, if there's a social environment, and then the next day they come with all their friends.
Yeah.
So I had a woman who was 75 come and join because she was having fibromyalgia, and one of the neighbours brought her to the Cannabis Club because she had heard that cannabis can help with extreme pain, and I took the woman in and I gave her a vaporizer. I gave her a vaporizer from the volcano, and within a couple of minutes she was fine. And the next day she came with 3 of her friends because it had just helped her, and she must have told her friends, hey, I was in a heap of pain the other day and I went and took some cannabis and the guy fixed me, you got to come try this out. Seriously, the next day 3 of her friends who were all over 75 came.
Wow.
And the thing is my Spanish wasn't so good, so the older people, they have a different accent. Yeah. And they started talking to me, and it was really hard for me to communicate with them. The older people in Spanish,
it's like they had a thick accent or something.
They had that. They were Catalan, so they had their accent was very Catalan, and trying to speak Spanish to them was always a bit more hard. But they loved coming, and a lot of them were medical users. They would show me, and they give 15%. They would come all the time and smoke joints, and it was always for pain or insomnia. Pain and insomnia. That's what we need it for.
That's it. I like the idea of it here. Like I can just imagine RSLs being replaced with them, or at least maybe even added to. Like the RSL becomes part of the clubs. I don't know, but you have your veterans come along, you have your seniors come along, and your retirees and all of that. It's like that all makes sense. But then just even having different generations interact in that same sort of space where it is like, you know, cannabis does make such a friendly atmosphere. Yeah. You know, when you drink, you generally do become a little more, I call it tribalistic. You know, you'll defend your people, anyone that comes and enters that, and, you know, you'll become friends with people, but it's people your own age.
It's a little bit standoffish as well.
Yeah,
totally.
When you run into like another group of people.
Yeah, you're like, who are you? This is my area.
That's just that shit.
But with weed, it's like, hey, bro, you want to try this?
But you know, we've built up this culture in Australia with just those substances. So it's experience. Once society gets experience and adjusts, I mean...
Well, when you're talking about, like, you know, smoking more in public, you know, I think that is... And that's something I think I've noticed myself just doing more. I'm like, I don't give a fuck anymore.
No.
One, having the medical script, I think, helps. Like, I'm just, like, confident that if you want to charge me, and I just go, okay, well, I'll go to court. I'll just tell the judge I'm a medicinal user. What do you mean? Yeah. If I get a fine for that, fuck off, whatever. All right, I'll cop it. But, like... I'm now like, my partner's like, oh, we shouldn't smoke here, but I'm like, who gives a fuck? Like, just go, because as long as I'm not, like, you know, putting it in someone's face, I don't really see the issue. But most of the time I'm on a vaporizer anyway, so I feel like if I'm on a vape, no one should bat an eyelid.
Like more common is just because police are inherently intimidating, and they'll like pull out the kind of like act.
Yeah, well,
when they see you doing it.
The worst part about the cop would be he'd take my fucking weed. Like, that's the worst part about it.
Well, the amount we pay for it,
if he took my weed,
a crime. That's the crime. The crime
Sure
is taking the weed.
Yeah, they should be prosecuted.
Yeah, they should be prosecuted for stealing. I mean, you know,
the worst thing is, the thing that the cops have fucking figured out is what they say now. If they really want to be assholes, which they all generally do, because they're like, oh, you're a medicinal user, hey? Well, how do I know what's in your tub? Maybe you bought that on the streets. And then that's how they take it. And they're going to like go, you're going to have to prove it to us.
Yeah.
Really?
We're going to put you through the courts.
But that's unfortunate. It sounds like Queensland Police need something way better to be doing than...
I think there are many other things they could be doing.
Yeah, really. I mean, that's a problem with a lot of police forces. I mean, in Victoria, when we ran for the elections, we were standing outside the county court, all of the candidates, and we were doing a photo shoot, and the police wanted their photos taken with us, and they were smiling, and they were like, you know, they were happy that there was somebody who was pushing for legalising weed.
Most cops don't want to fucking
because I could tell that they're kitted up for bad people, not for a bunch of hippies who want to smoke anymore. They know that it's a waste of time. They just got to listen to the Führer. And the Führer's telling them, you know, go chase the people who smoke plants.
Well, what's interesting about that is, I think on an individual level, you probably have a lot of that within the Queensland force too.
Yep.
But there's a cultural difference, I believe, in terms of like we still got holdover from the Joe Bjelke-Peterson days.
Yes,
the really corrupt police force there. I think there's still an attitude of like, you know, almost like fascist suppression in a way.
It's a private boys club on
Yeah,
a level
yeah,
where
yeah.
the guys at the top are maybe understanding now that yes, it's not all bad, but they still have quotas and they've still got a system that they need to appease, like a private jail system.
Sure.
And if you can put people through the system and they're easy and there's high numbers of them, then you can maintain the funding and you can maintain that system. Because it comes down to us still being numbers and not respected and not given rights.
That's true. Yeah, that's very true. Like the dehumanization component's a big part of it. I think the other component of it though is sort of police, military, you know, any kind of corporate structure or organization that has like very traditional ways of doing things. They're very strictly hierarchical and you perform a function within that broader system. So there's organizational and institutional ways to move on up by doing what they say. But there's also this this existing sense of how to enforce the hierarchy. It's more of a vibey thing, but the vibe within, I think, I don't have a whole lot of experience in the Queensland Police Force, but
You sure?
no, I don't know, like maybe I've somehow.
We're going to tap him down. Has he got a wire?
Fuck.
I mean, I've been to court times.
Why did I get raided?
It wasn't me, bro. Yeah, no. It's interesting that what you tend to see from police interactions with the public is that they seem to want to create a real separation between them as a dominant figure, as the authority, and you as the citizen who has very little rights and doesn't really have much recourse against the power of the state. Whereas maybe in other jurisdictions, when, you know, it's not like they treat you guilty until proven innocent, which is kind of how it feels here in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I think one of the big differences is that in Spain, the police, if they use physical force on you, that you can actually you can pretty much sue them.
Yeah,
you can go and give them. You can sue them. So they're very, very hesitant to be physical.
Sure.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, we've got all sorts of things that we've been talking about with the police in recent years, mainly due to the whole US, the Black Lives Matter sort of stuff. That started out pointing out all that. But I
Probably
think,
a weird time to do it at this point, given that there were just two massive murders in regional Queensland.
That's true.
What happened there?
Okay, you want to.
I don't know the idea. Yeah.
I didn't really.
So-
I just heard that two police.
Sovereign.
Asked them
Do you know what
and
a sovereign citizen is?
Yes.
The classic.
Okay,
Yes, I
so
do.
The,
I do.
The Train brothers were both most likely very heavy into the conspiracy theories, and especially Gareth, which is the guy that... It's like there's a weird love triangle
Conspiracy
between...
theories meaning that the government planned to lock us up over a bug, because that's not a conspiracy.
No. I think they did believe in
They're
in the
obviously
anti-vax
anti-COVID
stuff.
and stuff.
But
That's
that-
fine.
But that's not the conspiracy
they went more
stuff.
on to like
They were on forums saying basically the entire Australian state is illegitimate according to...
We're a corporate entity
Yes.
of the US.
But
Yes,
it's
there's
sort of
this-
true though. I think.
I don't think then their justification is necessarily true. I think that we should question the legitimacy of the state in more reasonable and rational ways. They weren't entirely...
I don't think they're wrong. I just think that maybe they might have been saying something that a lot of people weren't aware of, because I think that Australia is it's listed. I think Australia's listed, and when you're a citizen, your number goes under the listing.
It is technically like there are examples of the Australian government like treating itself as a corporate entity, but that's not to say that there isn't precedent for that in international politics. States tend to do that a fair bit. I think that their legitimacy
Australia as a
comes from the
company
fact
has
that
to-
they have the
How do you
power.
trade?
They have the means to enforce their power. They have the arms to enforce their power. That creates the situation where you have a colonial government still in power in Australia.
Yeah.
But with that being said, the whole situation is really interesting because there's this weird love triangle between Nathaniel and Gareth and Stacey. Stacey used to be Nathaniel's wife and then broke up and became Gareth's. And they all decided to basically head over to this place
This is crazy, this thing.
near like Chinchilla,
Yeah.
which has just like, it's like a big open blocks of land.
Yeah.
You got like you're just basically living in the bush without any services. So
Yeah,
it's
right.
where a lot of the people who are anti-establishment or maybe might not want to deal with, routine society, they
We'll
would
go and
go
have a community.
Yes, right. So Nathaniel has been missing because he used to be a teacher. He used to be in the Department of Education in New South
He
Wales.
was quite high up in there, wasn't he?
Quite high up, but
Yeah,
he
right.
decided to leave because he didn't want to take the jab.
Which I've seen this.
Anyhow, he was considered missing by the police because his wife had filed a missing report. So the police come in and do welfare checks on Nathaniel because they heard that he was living with Gareth. And I think they might have come 1 or 2 times beforehand, right?
Yep.
But this time, basically, they set up an entire armament. They had like foxholes and like rifles, like real
They
fucking.
went militant, did they?
Well, they basically decided we're going to kill as many police as we can when they come to the house. So they shot and killed and massacred like 2 police officers and then threatened to
And then
kill
one public
a third
person,
and a
yeah.
fourth, and the next door neighbour who came.
That's
to
a
check.
pretty extreme step to go to killing people.
Well, this is the thing. I think they might have not only the conspiracy stuff, they might have a lot of mental health
That
issues.
sounds like a bit more than just having your own beliefs and
Yeah.
actions around what
I mean,
government does, because taking someone's
True.
life is a pretty big step.
The thing is, it's that's where a lot of the really far right conspiracies
the
end
radical
up, where
people,
it's like
they can
you're a
believe
sovereign
it.
citizen.
Yeah.
I have the right to do this because you're on my land.
Yes, precisely.
Right, like
Uh-huh.
it's the problem is it's like it's kind of how far on that scale do you end up? If you go right to the end, I think that's where you kind of always end up. That or you end up like in the ground.
Listen, I got to say these guys do have a little bit of a valid point. All right, now not a lot of people are going to think I'm extreme because I sort of say that they do have a valid point, but in America, everyone has the right to bear arms because it means that law enforcement has a little bit more hesitation to think about entering your property.
Yeah, but how much more hesitation does the cop have to now fucking shoot you when you've got nothing? And how often does that happen?
No, but that happens regardless of whether people
No, because like look in Australia, how many times does a cop fucking shoot someone here? Very rarely. It's so rare.
Yeah,
Talk-
there's,
in
there's an
Victoria-
escalation that occurs.
Yeah.
I think.
But the reason is because they're cops here go with the assumption they don't have a gun, they're not going to hurt me.
In the US, they literally
they've
go
got a gun,
around
they're
with
gonna hurt me
semi-automatic
regardless,
machine.
You know, it's like
guns.
what's world
But the
have you
main
started
reason,
living
the main reason that people have weapons there is to protect themselves when governments get out.
Yeah,
of
but
hand.
Yeah,
this
but-
is the thing. It's a prisoner's dilemma, right? Because maybe there's an example of like there's obviously enough power in US militias to give the state at least like a bit of a. They would have to fight a civil war if
Yeah.
something really went down.
Yeah.
Here in Australia, that might be harder to do because we don't have
Arms.
weapons to
Yeah.
protect ourselves, blah, blah. But simultaneously, in the US, they've developed a culture of fear because everyone is armed
That's
and they
true.
have to protect themselves.
That's
and
true.
so it's a very alienating place to be.
Yeah, I did go there. I did experience that.
But the other thing about it is, this is my argument that people are like right to bear arms so we can overthrow the government if they do us wrong. Fuck off, because fundamentally they've got fucking drones that could just bomb
I
you
think
from
you're
the
right.
sky.
I think you're
They
right.
could, like the way they
You
could
could still fight a
militarize on the
guerrilla
general
campaign,
public,
but you would
you
lose.
couldn't. You just couldn't win. There's no fucking. It's too far now.
Look, I think that we've
300
detuned.
years
No,
ago,
I
yeah.
think what we've done is before we've gotten to that stage is we've detuned the men in society to be timid and tame and nice, and that
Right.
we shouldn't all think that you need to be unopinionated, softly spoken, and be able to be told what to do. It's good to be able to kick back. It's good to be able to push back. It's good to be outspoken sometimes, and it's good to piss people off. Because when
I
you're
agree.
having conversations with
agree with
people
this.
that need to be had, there's an element of emotion, and there's an element of all sorts of emotions, and they're the real things that need to be discussed. When people get emotional, that's when you know you're having a proper talk.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because, I mean, there's a history of suppression in Australia along a variety of fault lines. And that's kind of how our body politic functions. It keeps everything in order. But there'll be a point at which those emotions are most likely going to boil over, and then it'll be quite messy, and we'll have to deal with the problems that are associated with that. Because otherwise, basically, if you continue suppressing the population, it'll lead to a point where there will just be some kind of revolutionary act.
Well,
that
I've come back and I can see, like, from when I left before, that I met my friend who lives in Burleigh now. He's living in Victoria. So, and I've heard a lot of people from Victoria who've left and have moved for a more low pace, escaping the rat race, escaping the big high density areas, and coming to places that there's a slower pace, like Queensland. Queensland, you've got more space, and not everything can move so fast because you got smaller cities and more distance, so things are a bit slower. That's just the reality of living out here,
Yeah, it also just feels like the regional towns are more sizable.
They've grown.
Yeah, like in terms of, especially in Queensland, like I think half of the population is from regional Queensland. It's not like in Victoria where Melbourne is effectively the town.
Yeah.
And all of the other ones are just satellite towns. Where, I'm from regional Victoria, so I'm saying that like with a little bit of humour, because as much as those places they have like really tight-knit communities, they are quite, and they're a place where people can go to slow down, and it's brilliant that those places do exist in all across Australia. There is a sense that here in Queensland, we are like a connection of cities that effectively what happens in the southeast Queensland corner is not the only thing that happens.
Yeah.
That, what happens in Rocky and Cairns and Toowoomba and fucking Gympie, all of this matters, and we should take it into account, which I think it's a good model to look at Australia as a whole rather than focusing on the capital cities or focusing just solely on the country as well, for that matter.
Yeah.
Because, and thinking about all of these different divisions, like between, Europeans or white Australians and, new immigrants or the indigenous people, or thinking about the way in which, we tend to stratify ourselves along class lines, like, the people who tend to be more upper middle class landowners, or even like ultra rich versus people who are renting and are homeless. And, these things are universal to an extent because you see those problems pretty much everywhere.
In every Western society you have that.
Effectively, because we live under capitalism. And
Exactly. This is the environment that we created. But what I think you're starting to see is people who want a bit more community.
Yes.
They want to have less of that.
Yeah, precisely.
I'm starting, because I've got children and I'm coming back to Australia, I am starting to see more of that. They're wanting it in society.
I think people are wanting it. I think we just don't know how to do it yet.
Yeah, well,
like
this is the thing.
The self-discovery
the association stuff in Europe, and particularly Barcelona and Spain, very interesting to me because it's, again, the idea that you can develop all of these communities of association, that you can, because you mutually benefit from being with each other, we're just going to form a group here, and it's going to strengthen the bonds that we have with each other. Rather than here in Australia, I feel like it's a lot more dispersed, and we are encouraged to be more individualistic in a way that doesn't actually create real, like, authentic diversity. It just splinters us as people and prevents us from connecting to each other. We have to be hyper individualistic, but really the best way to become an individual and to individuate, to become like a person with depth, is to create community bonds. If you don't have people in your life,
because that's where you find meaning within the people.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird that we treat it
true.
It comes full circle. Like it's a really weird thing to become.
You're always a product of the people that you associate with, and you always can gain and learn things from people around you. You never stop. So when you have these environments, you can choose, and also using cannabis is a way to open your minds up and to get very creative.
Yeah.
Well, without cannabis, I was never able to connect with people. I had like no empathy before I smoked weed. Like, it sounds weird to say, but like, cannabis was the only reason I was able to kind of open up to people and understand. Yes, they have feelings and they're similar to mine, and sometimes sometimes you can hurt those, you know? And like, I have no issue still hurting people's feelings, do it all the time. But the point is more now when I do it, I understand that I've done it and I can course correct. Before weed, fuck me, I had no idea.
And part of that would probably be the substance itself. But part of it would also just be that you've created relationships
With
that
people.
are based around.
Yeah, and you have, sometimes in relationships you have to tell people stuff that's bad.
That's it.
That's a
True.
reality.
Very true.
If you get a close bond with someone and they manage to do something that you feel you need to tell them has affected
It's
you in a
best to be
negative way,
honest.
you tell them. And sometimes you're not friends after that. And sometimes after a bit of time, you might be friends after a bit of time. But yeah, I've always felt when I've told people, if I haven't been happy with them, or if I have too, conversely, if I've been happy, you got to spread the love. Like, this is a time of love. We're getting to Christmas. I don't celebrate Christmas myself, but it's a time of the year where we
it's
all
family
celebrate.
time,
We all celebrate. I celebrate Hanukkah, but it's the same thing. It's all a time of the year to reflect and to be the light, So just be the change and try and do the positive things, especially now. Everyone needs a bit of love.
That's for sure.
Love's the only way. And as cannabis users, we know all about that,
Don't we?
Yeah. We're a community of love, so...
Oh man, like, where would we be without weed? Like, truly, like, would you be dead?
I definitely would be, because I would have to have had multiple operations removing my stomach. So that was the choice I was given by the
Smoke
specialists.
weed or die.
Yeah, they were like, "Oh, we'll cut your stomach out," and I'm like, "That couldn't be good for me." So yeah, I would have been dead, because I don't think I would have survived those sort of traumas in my life, or trying to be. I'm a pretty active guy, so if I can't do what I want when I want.
Sure.
I don't want
What
to.
would have been the health impacts of
I
losing
wouldn't
a
have been
stomach?
able to. Well, people who have their stomachs removed need a colostomy bag,
Yeah,
which
shit.
means your intestine is hanging out of your stomach,
That sucks.
and you put a nappy over your intestine, and you use it's like a balloon, and you suck the waste out of your intestines by hand. So when your intestines are hanging out of your stomach on the outside, you can't really go swimming too much. You can't really get too active, because you
probably have to watch
you're in
what
a
you
pretty
eat, too.
compromised situation.
Yeah.
So, but if all these people who had their stomachs removed were told, hey, you could smoke joints and we don't have to do this to you, and you can jump in the water, and you can go to the gym, and you can live a normal life, they might have chosen smoking the joints before they had their guts removed. So I was lucky enough that by mistake, well, not by mistake, because I'd been growing cannabis my whole life, I just found that when I'd harvested, I didn't need to use my drugs that they had given me, which had nearly killed me twice anyway.
Wow.
And then I was like, when I realised it was the cannabis, I grew a lot more. And that's when I slipped into production from teeth. As I was a dental technician, I'd been running a dental laboratory for like 10 years, and then 6 years before that I'd been working with my father's business. And as soon as I got unwell, I just flipped over to production of cannabis. Like, I was a producer. I was like, okay, I better produce this stuff now too. I need it. And now all the pharmacies produce it for me. So I'd like to be producing it for myself again, though.
Yeah.
That's the best way, cheapest way.
I think this is the last podcast we're doing for the year. We haven't done too many this year, but leading into 2023, I think the general sentiment is like, we need to fight for our driving rights and our home grow rights. Those are the two things that are missing more than anything for, I think, the cannabis community.
That's
if we get those,
because if we
we're probably
can,
sitting pretty.
if we can lobby for those two things, I think it would.
Who's partial? So if it's hard to win a seat, a lower house seat here, who are the
Greens.
The
who's
Australian
partial?
Greens.
The
Yeah.
Greens are
That are-
pretty much our best.
Have they got
bet.
seats here?
Yep,
They do.
we've got two.
So they're worth a bit of a chat with.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we've had Berkman on.
Yeah.
and
He's a really
a
cool
supporter
guy.
and he's a cool dude. And-
Amy McMahon, I know personally.
What about any of the
Yeah.
libs? Any of the libs or Labor? Because you're going to find people
Labor, you
partial.
might find someone. The libs, you just fucking won't.
Yeah, they'll maybe
libs-
be in Queensland Labor. There might be a few people who would say I'm in favour of this policy, but
won't do it publicly.
Yeah. It's the issue.
That's the
I
problem.
think
You need people to do it publicly.
one of the negatives of Queensland politics, while we get into the intricacies of all that boring stuff, is that what you find is that the Queensland Labor government is really centrist, because they're trying to court votes from regional towns that have conservative views, because you
Yeah,
have
I
that
know.
larger regional population.
I know.
And Anastasia Palaszczuk has basically just governed like like a Liberal in New South Wales, or
That
like
still slightly believes in the public.
yeah, you see that she
Public
believes in the public service because she's a public servant.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's very little distinction. The only reason why there's a difference between the parties is because the LNP is fucking insane here, like absolutely nutbags, and that's the issue. Like you don't have any real progressive force willing to go, okay, we're going to reform society now. We're going to bring about big changes to society that aren't just like making abortion illegal, that kind of thing. Sorry, I might have offended some people there, but I don't care because that's the situation we're in Queensland, and it's bleak as fuck. People who have issues with their civil rights in general tend to fall on deaf ears in the majority parties.
Yeah.
But with that said, if we can actually find, because I think the real opportunity here is that in like Queensland's southeast, the Greens are getting very powerful. In fact, they are beginning to take federal seats. So there's this opportunity here where if they take council, Brisbane City Council, if they take the state government in the urban seats, and if they take the federal seats, they might be able to figure something out together and push the centrist Labor government to take action on it. And I think that's perhaps the one opportunity for us right now. But then, things could change down the line in the next decade or so.
The problem is that politicians come and go, I think.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
we really have to focus
It's
on
really
the public servants.
I agree.
Who are the public servants in Queensland
is
who
the
have been
thing.
here, who have been calling the shots?
This is
because
the thing.
I know that in New South Wales, when I go to I speak to some of the older hippies down there, they really know the public servants who are the guys who are the long-term guys who have got the anti-approach to it.
In Queensland, it tends to be like the legal system and the police that are anti. But if you look at like the health department or the Queensland Productivity Commission came out with a massive report saying basically you could save like hundreds of millions of dollars if you just made cannabis.
What was it? It
legal.
was like $500 million a
Yeah,
year.
it was wild.
A year, $500 million for
I don't know if it
cannabis.
was a year or 10 years,
See,
but it was a sizable sum.
Who came out with that? Was it
The QP.
Yeah, QPC, Productivity Commission in Queensland.
Okay.
We have a little article on it.
See, that would be good to approach them and say, "Hey guys, what do you think about cannabis social clubs?" And
Oh, shit.
like we could have a cultivation where the people could come in and you would self-cultivate the plants for the person if they didn't want to grow it.
Mm-hmm.
Under the self-cultivation framework. That's how a club really should work. That's how it works in Spain.
Right.
We self-cultivate for the members. They come in, they say how much they consume. We know that they can. Everyone in Spain can grow plants. There's no number.
Uh-huh.
So you can be growing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many you want to consume. So basically, you come in, you say how much you consume per month, and we base our cultivation off our membership's requirements. So here, if you're allowed to cultivate 2 or 3 plants each, you'd come to a cannabis club. The club would sign on your cultivation if you live in an apartment or if you're old or if you just can't grow, because not everyone can grow 3 cannabis plants that give them their cannabis for the year or
True.
whatever. And you go to someone who's got a facility that's licensed, a
And
social
you
club.
give them
You give
your
them
plants.
authority to grow by joining that club. You can't join more than one club. And you're a member of that club for the year, and you come to the club, and every month you either get your cannabis every night, or you can come once a month and get it. But the way it works in like Uruguay, where they have cannabis associations, which is a legal regulated model, and soon to be in Malta, which
cool.
have licensed some applicants to have cannabis clubs. Malta is going down the route of having a facility that they buy from that's licensed, which the Netherlands also is moving down, having facilities for each city. So Rotterdam, Amsterdam, all the major cities are going to have their own facility to supply the cannabis to the coffee shops.
cafes.
Yeah, they'll purchase from a
So
centralised...
they're like kind of in that grey area.
No, the government started taxing them, and now they're going to centralise production.
I see.
So the government's going to run production, and they're happy with that. They're happy. The government's going to be running production. All the tourism and all the sales of cannabis will go to the government. And that's a sort of model that we used to have before we sold all our infrastructure to overseas
precisely.
companies. When I remember,
before we lived in a neoliberal hellscape.
when I was a kid, the government ran everything.
Yeah.
And
And honestly, I think if the government is democratically controlled and there's like strong accountability between the people and the public sphere in terms of the state, that's not necessarily an issue. right?
I
It
think
can actually be a good thing.
I think people would just be happy to have a model that functioned where they could stop being criminalised, and I think that the police and society would change so dramatically. It would be such a monumental change that we would have an awakening here that would be so beneficial. But
that's probably why.
That's why
You know,
they
like
don't. That's why they're holding back because. Look, but just by
being permissive,
location
Yeah.
and the demographic of where we are in the world, Australia is very isolated. So the last thing they want us to do to make us harder to control would be to open our minds up and give us more rights. But we're just about there, I reckon. I know it's looking pretty dark, but if we're all the light, then the light will shine through the darkness.
I like it.
I think we're a while away, but I think
We've just got to stop
I think
acting
that-
like a puppet state. Like, we have the British flag on our fucking flag, and it's like that's the actual attitude we take towards everything in this country.
The question is, can Australia become a republic?
Well, I think so. It's
Because
possible.
that's kind of where I see all the opportunity is if we become a republic, we have to get a constitution, and that's where you can start
You could
talking
rewrite
about
the
these
laws.
things.
that would be a perfect timing to rewrite it.
What
because,
else?
Yeah.
It's just the opportunity.
we need
that
like
it
a
is.
bill of rights in this country.
Yeah.
That would be nice. Yeah.
That'd be sick. These are things that I believe are possible over the 21st century because things can't stay the same. There's a situation right now which isn't necessarily sustainable if you think about it over the long run. There'll be a point in time, especially when it comes to
You go.
what do you call it? Fucking when you're in a situation in modern advanced societies, let alone fucking the global south, places in the global north that are rich as fuck are going to experience increased rates of disaster because of climate collapse. You're going to have increased situations where there's more pressure on regular people with the cost of living, with basically people's living standards getting worse because power and wealth is being centralized in the hands of a few.
Yep.
That's not a sustainable situation. You're going to have to deal
but
with that.
I think that I'm starting to see now a time, maybe it's just to my age, but I'm starting to see more people who are looking to connect more with the community and to separate the needs that they have as a group away from those external structures that we so
to
live
create
by.
their own
markets,
institutions,
their own small circles that are decentralized. That doesn't mean you have to all go and live out in the country on a farm.
I'm kind of I believe in a form of anarchism, right?
That sort of is.
A collective anarchism where people come together.
Yes, exactly.
To basically provide each other's needs so that we don't need to rely on the capitalist marketplace to be fed and to have
and
clothes.
this could be just as an association structure, an association of food. You have your own food association.
Co-ops.
Your food co-ops.
And they just connect together on a macro scale.
Yeah.
You have food co-ops working with food co-ops, and there's a higher democratic organization that links them together.
And they're all regional because really your food, you're not travelling vast distances, so they're all very localized. And not only that, once these co-ops start, you're actually starting to connect with people in your area.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I can already see about when I go to places like Northern New South Wales and Queensland, because there's a lot of primary industry here.
Yep, there's a lot of labour over here.
So and there's a lot of land for it. So you see a lot of agriculture, and then when you see these communities, they're very aware of each other and they're very connected.
For sure.
So once you make these connections, then you're going to connect with like-minded people, and you can maybe separate from a few of these systems.
Yeah, and it balances the picture where it's not so heavily stacked in, the direction of the big guy. Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. The whole idea that we should be taxed for everything, and that you can't grow.
Not only that, but
something.
the taxes for regular people are so high, and in comparison, there are massive corporations and really rich individuals who basically get away with paying no tax.
That's what they do. They work from a place of debt and moving it around so that the money's not in their pocket.
Because they are
somewhere
literally
else.
finance experts. They can get away with this shit. It's like arcane magic.
They do it. They do it by lending and investing and putting into assets and letting their money stay in assets and moving
and
money
legislation,
around.
because you got to remember that negative gearing and capital gains tax and all of this kind of stuff.
They're things for us,
it's just
the little fellas
well,
who we have to cop it.
This is the thing. It's
Actually trying to climb up.
The question is how do you climb up? Only so many can. You know?
I think like it depends on what you're willing to do. Everyone has a different approach of a path, and some people are willing to do things that they look. Ultimately, it depends. What is your focus? If you want to make a lot of money, there's plenty of ways you can do it. You
Sure.
might not enjoy it,
Yeah.
but if your focus is to go and make money, then there are plenty of ways you can go and
It's
do
not
it.
hard to make a lot of money.
No, you've got to
It's
work
a
hard
very
at
easy
it.
thing.
You've got to work hard to it, but people think that people have this delusion that you got to enjoy it, and if you're not enjoying it, then don't do it. But in reality, it depends what your focus is.
Sure,
Like you can suffer, and that's the reason sort of why I looked at politics. Not that I wanted to do it in a massive
But you
way,
had a goal in mind.
but
right?
I thought that I was responsible, that I should do it.
Sure.
Because there's not too many people who have had the experiences I've had to go up there and sort of
Yeah, to be able to actually share,
demonstrate
being
the
in a
experience.
pot club, like running a pot club, the culture of another country, the way people interact. Like,
It's rare you see that perspective in like public office.
that's it. But one of the weird things as well is, how else do you get it? You know, you have to live that, and then have someone explain it to you. So I think.
Yeah, you either got to be
Having-
very open-minded, or you've just got to be part of that community and understand it from.
Yeah,
different
but see, like, you
experience.
know, youngins like us, we're getting. Oh well, I'm getting older. You're getting kind of older.
We're all getting.
How old are you? How old is it?
I'm 30.
You
right?
guys are babies, like
We are.
You're babies.
But here's the thing. It's like, if we were to talk about, because like when I found out about cannabis and I loved cannabis, I studied it, I looked up everything. I understood the Spanish pot club shit when I was at uni. Like that's what I was like looking at that. I was looking at what the US was doing. I was looking at the entire world. Uruguay, Jose, that dude became Jose. Like he became an inspiration to me. I'm like, I want to be that guy. Like
he was
where he gave
aggressively
all of
done.
his money away, and he's just like, what did he do? He's like living on a farm, and he
Yeah.
still drives an old Beetle and shit. And I was like, that's a president. Like that's a man of the people. But I looked at all of the models that people have developed once I decided cannabis was good. This took a while. But Spain always stood out to me. I'm like, that makes the most sense to me.
It is. It's the
It
most.
just made the absolute most sense because, one, you've got the normalization and
Exactly.
the education side, right? Two, you figured out how to distribute it just to the people who want it, and you keep it out of the hands of kids because you can't be a kid that joins it.
Exactly.
Right? So
Exactly.
it's just such a solid model. And then the social aspects, I don't know, probably for me, I always felt like I was isolated and a little, what's the word? Bit of a loner kid, right? Like I fit in with people, but I never really felt like I belonged. Found cannabis, suddenly felt like I belonged. I think that would be the case for a lot of people. You know?
I think what it does, like if law enforcement just looked at it from the perspective of that, it's massive harm minimization, because you just cannot enter these places if you're underage. It gets people out of their homes. So once you're out of your home and you're in an environment where there's people, you're going to be consuming less because you're going to be talking more.
Sure.
And you're going to be doing things. When you've got games and activities, you're going to be stimulated
It's
to interact
remarkable
with
that,
in that environment.
We don't just take the example of alcohol, look at like what prohibition and temperance did for alcohol, and then look at like all of the benefits of social interaction that alcohol brings, and then just like take that argument, drop it over onto cannabis, and boom.
It's just not inventing. No one's inventing the wheel.
No.
It's just about saying, this is going to be far better for society and for the police force, because the police force will be able to refocus. Like they won't be worked up that they're coming into a family home for growing a couple of plants in the backyard. You know,
Have to deploy a strike force. for
yeah,
this one.
going to organise the drug team, the guys with the weapons. It's all just a bit much violence, and society's over it because they've had a couple of years of this absolute rubbish over the bug with the cops running around like crazy, making sure everyone was at home, and it was just a joke. It happened everywhere in Australia, it happened in Spain, it happened everywhere. All right, everyone lost their mind and wanted us to stay at home, and that was just like the real essence of health. If the government wanted you to be healthy, they're going to be telling you to go out and exercise. They're going to be telling you to eat properly. They don't tell you any of that. They don't want you to be healthy.
I think part of it was that, in terms of like preparedness for a pandemic, right? Most of the states, most of the health organizations, weren't really prepared to take on the load that it's almost like they treated themselves like eBay or Amazon. They had these just-in-time services. And so as soon as you have like a slightly higher caseload of people in hospital, the system collapses. So effectively, they make it your problem and then criminalize you when you do the wrong thing,
I think
because they don't have the system set up.
That is part of the fear that everyone got put under. Because like the reality of staying healthy is everyone is in charge of their own health. You make decisions by what you put in, on, and around your body. But
to Mitch's point, put it this way:
there's a systemic picture.
No. But look at it like this: imagine hospitals, right,
No,
before pandemic, running at 95%, right,
Which is effectively
pandemic
bad.
hits. Now the hospital's running at 120,
And it means a
right?
cancer patient might not get the
But
resources they
then
need.
you who fucking cut your arm bleeding, right? Just because it was an accident.
I
Then you
agree.
get fucked. That's the
agree.
problem. I think. People
I
kind of
agree. I
misunderstand.
agree that people who had genuine, continuing chronic illnesses got put by the wayside over this, and that was the real problem. That people who needed treatment couldn't get it.
Yeah, for
Not
sure.
just for COVID, but just regular people going in for all their stuff. That is what hospitals are used for, and the hospital is an emergency place. It's not healthcare. It's a disease treatment. It's where you go when you're stuffed. Okay, so when it had this situation happen, all the hospitals got full. But what it was in reality was a reflection to us as a society that we need to learn more how to look after our health. Because even for the hospitals to be running at 95%, okay, it shows that we're very dependent on these systems to maintain our health, and that society really has to learn how to look after themselves, man. And what I'm saying is governments are not going to give you information to look after your health. The information is there for everybody to find. But after years of looking after myself with a chronic illness and having to listen to my body and be very careful what I put in myself and how I live, I'm able to be very healthy, very fit. I had this virus where I didn't smell. My wife had it. My kids just couldn't smell, but they were healthy. We never got tested. I just knew it was a bad flu, and I wrote it out. I'm a healthy guy. My wife's healthy. It wasn't pleasant. It was 2 or 3 weeks of being sick.
Yeah, it can hit you.
Sore bones, and but I survived it because I'm healthy. And society on a whole now doesn't know how to maintain their health. And that's a reflection of today's society.
I think you got a good point in terms of people should be held personally responsible.
Yeah,
in that
I know
way.
what you're saying, that the hospitals were pushed in this system and all this stuff, but what it really was a reflection of was how unhealthy society is today, and that we're not in a place where we know how to take care of ourselves anymore, and that comes from experience. You know, like when there's something very empowering about curing yourself from a chronic illness that I had, is that once you're able to cure yourself and once you're able to be healthy, it's very empowering. No one can really tell me how to stay healthy.
Yeah, look, I hear you. I just think there's something there in terms of like, not always is that possible, right? You got people who are in situations where
I've had people pass away from this illness.
Right,
I know
exactly.
people who are a bit younger than me who've had Crohn's, who I've met, and they chose not to use cannabis.
Yeah.
Now, and they've gone down the allopathic treatment with doctors and having surgeries, and they died at a few years ago. Some of them I knew them, you know, they're in their 40s, and I haven't had a surgery. These people having surgeries ended their lives. These treatments ended their lives. You only have so much of your body chopped out of you before you stop working.
Fair enough.
So
That's a bit of a grim place to be.
Well, it's true.
just the
though.
reality for some people.
It's a dark reality, yeah.
For some people, that's, you know.
Well, I think I agree with you in the sense that the medical establishment and what it always has to offer people, it often doesn't lead to optimal outcomes.
It's not even
Can
the medical
actually, though.
establishment. It's more about let's look at ourselves and learn what is good for us, and we use the medical establishment if we're in a place of disease that we've let ourselves get there. But before that, we're eating right, we're exercising right, and then our bodies can maintain balance and hopefully not become genetically like mutated. My system started attacking a healthy part of my body, and I started to die. So
Sure.
that's what happens with autoimmune diseases. It affects your health quite severely. And luckily, I found out, as being a cannabis consumer my whole life, that we have an endocannabinoid system, which, thank God, is connected to cannabis. And all animals on the planet have it, pretty much, except for insects. So when I consume cannabis, my pain would go, my symptoms would go, and it was an incredible thing. I never thought that it did anything else except get me high help me work, because I was using it to help me work in my dental laboratory. And then all of a sudden didn't need to use my pills. I wasn't internally bleeding anymore. And you start to realize that the way this thing works, it's because we have an evolutionary connection to it, and certainly makes life easy for a lot of us who have issues, and it's very safe. I've had my daughter not breathing. She had croup in Spain. Now, because in Spain I could get access to full spectrum CBD products over the counter, you don't need a prescription. I had 10,000 milligrams CBD, which is like pure CBD oil in MCT, in coconut. It was Charlotte's Web. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but my daughter wasn't breathing. Her face was blue, and I grabbed her and I ran downstairs and I took the 10,000 milligrams CBD oil. I put it in hot water. I put a syringe in the top, and I gave her a full syringe worth in her mouth orally down the back of her throat, and within 2 minutes she was not blue, and in 3 minutes she was breathing normally. So most people don't experience or have the ability to experience that in Australia, where having high CBD oil can remove any respiratory issue your child has. You don't have to call an ambulance, don't have to run to hospital. My other son also, already he's 6, he had it recently, he had croup, and the same thing happened. I started getting worried. Let's take him to hospital. And I gave him CBD. I still put him in the car and drove to the emergency ward because I was just absolutely beside myself. My little baby wasn't breathing perfectly.
Yeah.
He was really restricted. And then by the time we got there, his breathing had cleared up, and I just turned around and drove back home. But CBD, with THC, of course, full spectrum, it's helped my children breathe in situations. So most families, if they knew that, they would all have it in their fridges at home. So this sort of information comes from experience of being in an environment where you can access it safely. So we all need to have cannabis around us. The aging population would benefit a lot from it.
Big time. But maybe that's also a problem. We can't sustain them as is if they keep living happy.
That's up to us to dictate what we want as a society, and not let it be dictated to us. We have to understand, and our job as cannabis people is to say everybody can benefit from it, because they just would. And you know what? I see a lot of people now who are getting medical cannabis who wouldn't have before, just because they can just see that the perception of society's changed. People are getting it in creams. You can get it as medical cream. You can get it as roll-ons. You can get it in drops. Capsules. You can get it as capsules.
Can't get edible gummies and things.
You can get CBD gummies.
I've seen them. Yeah.
CBD gummies, and you can also get hash. So you can get extractions and a few things. So you can virtually get the whole gamut, and you can help people. I've assisted a lot of people even since I've been back with issues that I've met. People who've been covered in chronic skin conditions, and they virtually are bedridden, and they just tell them, hey, you can get a cream, you can take drops, and you can smoke, and you start doing all those 3 at once, and you're going to start feeling better real quick. And whammo, they're off the antihistamines that don't work because their skin's all red and they're in, these lesions all over them. I've seen a few people like that. That's just from too much pharmaceuticals, not enough cannabis, and too many inputs, synthetic inputs that we're surrounding ourselves with in our food. Vaccinations, lots of things, guys, that you think are so good for you. Just remember, we're all biological entities. We evolved over millions of years. All animals on the planet have evolved over millions of years, way before vaccines and pharmaceutical companies came around. So do a bit of thinking.
Fair enough. I think there's a good argument to be made in terms of placing that responsibility on yourself as an individual and making decisions on an informed level.
It's hard when you live in a society that numerically is always going to push against you with the information they're given. But in my experience, from having 3 children who have never had any vaccines, never had any pharmaceutical inputs put into their body ever, that if you really want to argue with me, then you show me the control group or the control population of unvaccinated people who haven't had pharmaceuticals, and you compare them to the vaccinated population who've had pharmaceuticals their whole life, and you're going to see very distinct differences. That's just the only way. There's no argument. You can just take it or leave it, There's a black and white reality to it.
I think that there potentially could be some kind of, meta-analysis of that
There has been some done lately. I know it's off cannabis, but you know, it's one of the things that society has its head in the sand over, I suppose. You know,
I mean,
in terms of health.
I tend to believe that these things are quite complex and exist on a case-by-case sort of basis. I wouldn't necessarily say that all pharmaceuticals or even all vaccinations have deleterious effects. Some of the more harmful inputs are stuff like PFAS in our water and microplastics in our food.
I think what you're saying is all of it's very relevant, but it's so relevant that you actually do have to look at all the inputs. You just have to be cognitive. You just got to be cognitive that, and make it simple that we're all biological entities. Cannabis is biological. It reacts strongly with our systems and very effectively. Why? Because we have a system that's evolved from this plant that when the phytocannabinoid enters your endocannabinoid system, the receptors pick up and absorb that input, because the enzymes in those receptors can absorb it and communicate with that biological input. Yep. When you put synthetic inputs into your body, regardless of what you believe, the reality is your body does not have an enzymatic connection in whatever receptor that input is designed to fit into that will absorb
Sometimes it does.
Yeah, no, it's not that they don't. It just does not have the same. Everything is about absorption, which is why cannabis is so effective, right?
Yeah, right.
The absorbability of this and the lack of toxicity that you guys have experienced using cannabis is very obvious, right? The same with it as a medicine that I use it for, right? It's not toxic, but it keeps me healthy. Now, all medications I had prior to that had very bad side effects on my body. All of them. Even pain medication.
Pain medication can be pretty hardcore.
Yeah, on your stomach, on your brain, okay? Now, imagine getting a schedule of 43 syringes bypassing your skin as a young child growing up in the name of protection. And these inputs have trace elements of mercury, trace elements of aluminium, trace elements of human DNA or dog DNA or monkey DNA or other animal DNA that they proliferate whatever virus they're saying they're protecting you from. And
I wouldn't go that far, but fair enough. Continue.
But this is realistic. If you're looking at it black and white, you're looking at these inputs and you're saying, okay, whether they're in food or they're injected directly into your bloodstream, bypassing your body's biggest defense mechanism, your skin, they're all going to affect you biologically internally. And when you make a schedule of doing that as a healthy entity, it doesn't make much sense to me. The main things that make sense to us that we should be looking at is our decisions of like where we're living. We've got shelter, the food. These days we don't have to think about putting the heating on, putting on the AC, living in comfortable environments, having shelter.
Assuming you have those basics covered.
When you've got these basic things covered, you're a lot healthier. The rest of the decisions are about what you're putting in on and around your body. But as long as you've got shelter and you're living in a good environment, your running water is, your drinking water is separated from your grey water, and these basic principles that we've evolved to have better health standards from, then we're very privileged. We all live in very good times, guys. I think,
I couldn't agree more.
We can improve it.
I also think that I'm not necessarily of the opinion that I think there's a good argument to be made when it comes to particularly the endocannabinoid system and its like synergy with the human body. But I wouldn't necessarily say that like medicine or pharmaceuticals in and of themselves can't be of broader use if they're within their right context.
I'm saying that they've just become too much.
Yeah, I agree. They've become quite dominant.
They've become the dominant factor.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
It's the dismissal of other ways of treating people. I think that's kind of where the bigger issue is.
It's true. It's true.
And
there's
I
of
understand
course
your end of as well, like when you talk about mandates and things, like to me that always gets quite sketchy. Because I just don't like being told what to do, right? But there's the whole case of, for example, I don't know if we'd go to like say the chicken pox thing, but we don't have chicken pox exist nearly as much as we used to.
Yeah,
right?
but
there's all these like things where science has come through.
Evolved.
I think it's hard to say, like what Mitch's point is more, it's hard to dismiss that all or most, pharmaceuticals have actually caused problems where they've actually provided a lot of life for people.
Yeah.
While cannabis works for us, fuck man, like cannabis doesn't work for everyone. I know people that cannot respond to cannabis. There's people that have allergic reactions to cannabis, people who just have too many mental issues going on that cannabis actually flares it up.
If you've got some...
But the thing is, like, there's a lot of people for that, so you need these other options
diversity
as well.
of treatment options is good.
And even those other options, like, sometimes cannabis just can't help with absolutely everything.
No, I've had pain that cannabis doesn't help with at a time. Like I've had issues, but your overall health, guys.
Without cannabis, where would we be?
Yeah, but also your overall health shouldn't be looking at a place of disease. You should be looking at it as preventative life. We should be looking at lifestyle as preventative.
I would agree with you insofar as we can achieve that, right? But because we live in a broader context, which actively, even if we make all of the right decisions, actively creates the right context for disease to propagate and to become endemic within society. Like, that's why you have a pandemic, because we have this highly advanced technological community. And so we need to create new systems and structures, and we need to create new ways of defending ourselves.
Just reassessing. We've come a bit far. Let's go back. Let's get a bit more of a balance.
Good idea. I think that we've kind of said what we need to say on this topic. So
Exactly.
I think we should try and wrap.
That's it.
So... what's next for Marc? You mentioned...
I'm going to try and improve the environment.
Improve the environment.
That's
cool.
Good.
That's a good segue.
Try and make hemp, and impacting the environment, and also just give something to consumers that they can associate with cannabis in a different way.
Sick.
Some consumer products that people can see and want to see and have, and know that it's got biodegradable aspects, and that it's going to be, carbon positive. It's not going to be something that will sequester carbon. It'll be renewable. This is what we have to look at, really.
I think that makes sense.
Cleaning up our industrial applications to the world.
Yeah.
We only got one planet.
Yeah. Very true. And we don't treat it like as a case.
We have to treat her better.
A lot better.
More Mary Jane.
Definitely a lot more weed needs to be grown.
Exactly. You see, that's the consensus.
Greener earth.
Yeah, greener earth. More weed.
Sounds good to me.
But thanks for having me, guys. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been great to have
It's
you
been
on
a blast.
too.
It's been
really
time.
interesting, engaging conversations.
I really hope we can get a social club model, because I think that's ultimately where my dream lies. I think it's why so many people actually like cannabis is the social aspect. Like, the best times I've had on cannabis has been with other people. It's not by myself. And I know people who do smoke by themselves, or mostly have, because they've had to hide it from people. And it's so funny when they get to smoke it with people, like how much they come out of their shell and they start to realize. So I don't know, something about bringing people together through cannabis is what we're about here. So hearing your story of bringing people together through cannabis, very inspiring. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's really good to be back in Australia. Let's bring it to the Aussies. Need it. So let's be the change.
All right.
Yeah, we'll see you in 2023.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Catch
it's
you
going to
later.
be a shaky year, I reckon. I reckon there's some shit going to go down in 23.
Exciting.
I'm keen. Stay tuned.
Ciao.